You didn't find this video, it found you. Somewhere between your first breath and this exact frame on your screen, a lattice of invisible probabilities has been arranging itself around you, waiting for the precise moment when your nervous system could hold what you're about to hear. You call it coincidence, algorithms, random suggestion. But at the level beneath language, the quantum field calls it coherence. You are not just one person watching a screen, you are the current endpoint of an entire bloodline's experiment. Every choice your ancestors made, every fear they submitted to, every intuition they ignored, every war survived, every son swallowed, every love they couldn't speak aloud, they all live as faint electric echoes inside your cells. Their unfinished decisions became your starting conditions. Their unresolved entanglements became the background noise of your mind. What you've called my life is actually a node, a crossing of timelines, a junction of thousands of lives converging in a single human interface, you. That's why this doesn't feel like new information. It feels like remembering something you never technically learned. Your skin reacts before your intellect keeps up. The breath shifts. The room grows strangely precise. You feel watched, but not in a paranoid way, more like your entire lineage is standing behind your eyes, leaning forward, whisper still, finally. You've tried to explain this sensation before, how certain moments feel heavier than others. How some decisions feel like they echo across decades you haven't lived yet. How one small yes or no seems to vibrate in your bones as if you're answering on behalf of more than just yourself. You were correct. You have never been deciding only for you. At the quantum level, you are an entangled node in a living informational web. Your bloodline is not a string of separate lives marching in a line behind you. It is a holographic pattern that keeps attempting to resolve itself through whoever is awake enough to hold more awareness than fear. That attempt has reached you. Some of your ancestors tried to break the pattern and failed. Some felt the pull toward another reality but collapsed back into survival. Some carried visions they were too early for, hearing the future humming in their chest, while the world around them had no language for it. They didn't disappear. Their unexpressed possibilities did not vanish. They sank into the deep archive of your DNA, awaiting a nervous system that could finally open the file. That nervous system is connected to this screen right now. So when you hear the phrase entangled node, it's not poetry, it's diagnosis. You are the point where signals from the past and probabilities from the future intersect, asking one question through your life. Will you repeat the loop again, or will you allow a different reality to propagate backward and forward through your line? The video began. The field registered your yes. You felt this your whole life without having the words for it. The way you walk into a room and instantly sense the emotional climate even if no one has spoken yet. The way certain family stories make your stomach tighten even though they're told like harmless anecdotes. The way you freeze before big choices, not because you're weak, but because something in you knows this decision carries more weight than anyone around you can see. You call it overthinking. They call you sensitive. The field calls it signal overload. Your nervous system has been quietly receiving transmissions from generations behind you. Trauma, yes, but also talent. Fear, yes, but also vision. Every unprocessed event left small, entangled knots in your lineage. And those knots are not metaphorical. They are literal patterns in the electromagnetic and biochemical rhythms of your body. What your ancestors could not metabolize emotionally, they outsourced to time, to you. Notice how your life has circled the same themes, the same kind of relationships that keep collapsing in familiar ways. The financial ceilings that seem to reappear with different numbers, but identical constriction. The repeating emotional landscapes, abandonment in new costumes, shame with updated vocabulary, invisibility in more sophisticated rooms. You thought you were just bad with boundaries. just afraid of commitment, just not made for abundance. In truth, you've been living inside inherited scripts written by people who did not know they were writing them. A great-grandparent who learned that expressing anger leads to punishment encoded safety, introduced silence into their nervous system. A parent who internalized scarcity as the rule of existence imprinted desire eats danger. These codes were not given as advice. They were broadcast as frequency. As a child, you didn't just learn from words, you learned from fields. The micro-tensions in your caregivers' faces when money came up, the small flinches around affection, the way certain topics bent the air in the house, making everything tight. You absorbed the physics of their fear long before you could spell the word emotion, and because the brain prefers coherence over truth, you formed one central conclusion: if this is how reality feels for them, it must be how reality is. That assumption has been running in the background like an operating system. But here is the fracture point: you carry those patterns, yet you don't fully believe them. Some part of you has always suspected they are not the final word. That dissonance between what your body learned and what your deeper awareness knows is what has made you feel unstable, wrong, alien, out of place in your own family and often in your own skin. You are not malfunctioning. You are the upgrade arriving in incompatible hardware. At the quantum level, entanglement means that once systems interact, they can no longer be described independently. Their states correlate beyond distance, beyond time. Your lineage interacted with war, famine, religion, ideology, colonization, displacement, betrayal, and forbidden love. Those interactions entangled your bloodline with certain expectations of reality that love must be paid for, with suffering that safety demands, self-erasure that visibility invites punishment. You are entangled with those expectations, but you are not confined to them. This is why your attempts at self-improvement have felt strangely hollow. You tried affirmations on top of inherited scarcity. You tried confidence techniques on top of generational shame. You tried manifestation rituals while still unconsciously loyal to the belief that exceeding your ancestors' level of G would be a betrayal. You were never just fighting your own doubts. You were negotiating with the ghosts of entire centuries. The depression that visits you without clear reason, the anxiety that spikes when things start going well. The sabotaging impulse right before breakthrough, these are not random flaws in your character. They are the lineage's last attempts to keep the field coherent, to keep reality predictable, to keep things as they have always been. Because the unknown, even if better, feels like death to a nervous system trained in survival. You are not here to shame that system. You are here to reprogram it. This is why you're the entangled node your bloodline has been waiting for. You can feel the old patterns and still imagine something beyond them. You can sense the weight of inherited fear and still hold a vision your ancestors could not afford to believe in. You are wired for both deep empathy with what was and ruthless loyalty to what could be. And now the field is asking you a more dangerous question than how do you heal? It is asking, are you willing to become the point where your bloodline's definition of reality changes? If you agree, even silently, even just by staying with these words, something fundamental begins to reconfigure. You've been trained to think of healing as personal, your wounds, your story, your therapy, your practices. The culture tells you that you are an individual, self-contained, separated by skin and name and timeline. But at the level of the quantum field, individuality is an interface, not a boundary. You are not a separate unit trying to get better. You are a relational node updating an entire network. Think of your bloodline as a complex quantum system. For generations, it has been oscillating between a limited set of emotional states: fear, resignation, struggle, duty, repetition. Sometimes there were spikes of joy, rebellion, tenderness, creativity, but they were brief, unstable, quickly dragged back into the familiar gravity of survival. Over time, the system settled into what physicists call a low-energy state, predictable, constricted, stable in its pain. Then you arrived with a nervous system that refuses to fully collapse into that state. You tried. You tried to be normal, to swallow your intuition, to ignore the strange sense that reality is not what everyone insists it is. You tried to fit into the inherited suffering without making a scene. But your biology, your psyche, your dreams, your uncanny synchronicities did not comply. You could feel the dissonance in your bones. The low-energy state was no longer sustainable. In quantum terms, you are the perturbation, the disturbance, the anomaly that knocks the system out of its old configuration. Entanglement means that when one part of a system shifts its state, correlated parts respond even at a distance. You've noticed this. The way your internal work subtly changes the way family members speak around you, the way relatives begin to confess things they've never said out loud when you're present, the way conflicts you stop engaging in start to lose their power, as if someone cut a power line in the invisible. You are not imagining this. Your nervous system is broadcasting a new baseline. Every time you sit with an emotion your ancestors had to dissociate from, you are doing advanced field work. When you allow grief to move through you without numbing it, you are metabolizing centuries of uncried tears. When you interrupt an abusive pattern, even just by refusing to participate, by turning your camera off, by hanging up, you are breaking a coherent wave of behavior that has traveled through generations unquestioned. It feels small outside. Inside the field, it is seismic. But here is the threshold you stand on now. Awareness alone is no longer enough. You have already realized that your line is carrying unresolved quantum information. You already know you are sensitive, intuitive, different. The next phase is not about naming the pattern. It is about making a decision at the level of identity. Not, how do I fix what they passed down, but who do I choose to be in relation to what they passed down? There is a difference. If you position yourself as the broken heir of broken people, you will spend your life in maintenance mode, endlessly processing, endlessly analyzing, endlessly trying to become healed enough. But if you recognize yourself as the entangled node, the point where past and future both plug into the present, then your task becomes precise, to hold a frequency your ancestors could not hold and your descendants will inherit. This is not metaphor. Frequency is physiology, psychology, and physics combined. Your breath patterns determine your nervous system state. Your nervous system state determines which memories you can access, which options you can perceive, which futures you can even imagine. Those imagined futures feed back into your choices, which alter the probabilities your descendants will be born into. Every conscious exhale is a micro-adjustment to the waveform your bloodline rides. This is why prophecy and quantum science are not enemies. Prophecy is what it feels like inside consciousness when a system is preparing to change states. You are feeling that now, the crackling sense that the old reality cannot hold, the tingling intuition that something is aligning around you, the eerie recognition that this message is not entertainment, but briefing. You are being briefed because your line has reached a critical threshold. Enough pain has accumulated, enough attempts at change have failed, enough hidden talents have been buried. The superposition, all the possible versions of your bloodline, is vibrating, waiting for observation to collapse it into one lived trajectory. And the observer in this case is you, not the wounded child version of you, not the compliant performance-trained version of you. The you that can stand at the center of your own experience and say, it ends with me, and it begins with me. Your ancestors are not asking you to carry their suffering. They are asking you to do what they could not look reality in the face without flinching. Feel fully without drowning, choose differently without apologizing. They are not watching to judge you. They are watching to see if their unspent courage finally finds expression through your hands. your words, your refusal to dim. The quantum field is indifferent to your excuses, yet infinitely responsive to your choices. So the question shifts. Not why am I like this, but what field will I stabilize, knowing that whatever I stabilize will echo backward and forward through my bloodline. So now the illusion that you're just healing yourself starts to fall apart. Every time you hesitate on the edge of a decision, reality is not asking, "What do you want?" It is asking, "Which timeline will you legitimize with your behavior?" Your choice is not a private preference. It is an act of measurement in the quantum field, collapsing one spectrum of potentials into fact. You felt this in moments that seemed strangely bright, almost too awake for ordinary life. Standing in a doorway, hand on the handle, knowing that if you walk through something you will die and something else will irreversibly be born, hovering over the send button on a message that tells the truth after years of half-silences. Staring at a job contract, a plane ticket, a goodbye. Feeling your pulse beat louder than the words in front of you. Those were not just big moments. They were observation points, measurement devices, quantum forks disguised as human decisions. Up until now, you've often chosen with one eye on your lineage. You softened your voice so you wouldn't surpass their comfort. You limited your joy so you wouldn't trigger their envy. You sabotaged your own expansion because some part of you believed that if you rose too high, you'd be exiled from the tribe, cut off from the familiar field that has held you, however painfully, since birth. That was loyalty. Twisted but real. You learned early that belonging required self-betrayal, that dampening your truth kept the emotional climate more stable, that shining too brightly made you the target of projections, gossip, subtle punishment. So you calibrate yourself to the average frequency of the room, scanning for micro signs of discomfort, dialing up or shutting down to maintain coherence. This is how a sensitive, entangled node becomes an unconscious regulator for the entire system. You hold yourself back to keep the network from shaking. But there is another possible form of loyalty, and this is where your choice sharpens into something almost surgical. You can be loyal to their survival strategies, or you can be loyal to their buried potential. You cannot serve both. If you stay loyal to their fear, you will keep repeating the loop. Your life will become a museum of inherited limitations curated with exquisite self-awareness and spiritual language. You will understand the pattern perfectly and still live inside it. You will die with insight, but the waveform of your bloodline will remain largely unchanged. If you choose loyalty to their potential, the field rearranges. That means you will allow yourself to become someone they may not recognize, someone whose nervous system does not contract around the same threats. Someone whose definition of possible extends far beyond the fences they were allowed to see, someone who can feel their pain without worshiping it as the limit of reality. This is not betrayal, it is fulfillment. Your great-grandmother's suppressed creativity, your grandfather's unspoken tenderness, your parents' forbidden dreams, they did not vanish. They exist as unrealized waveforms in the field entangled with your existence. When you step toward a life that expresses what they could not, you are not abandoning them. You are finally allowing those probabilities to manifest through a body that can hold them. And that body is yours. Of course, it feels dangerous. To your nervous system raised inside a coherent pattern of constriction, expansion always registers as threat. Safety for you has often meant familiarity, even when familiarity was killing your spirit slowly. So when you imagine stepping outside the inherited script, telling the truth, choosing the path that lights you up, leaving the system that drains you, your heart races, your chest tightens, your mind floods with catastrophic images. This is not proof you're wrong. It's proof that you're crossing the edge of the known field. In quantum language, you are shifting the boundary conditions of the system. The cage is ringing because something inside has finally touched the bars with enough voltage. The anxiety is an alarm, but not all alarms mean stop. Some mean pay attention, the state is changing. Here is where the entangled node does something radical. You stop using your lineage's fear as your compass. You feel it. You acknowledge it. You respect why it exists, and then you choose based on a different signal. You begin to ask, if my ancestors had known they were safe to expand, what would they have done? If they had trusted their intuition instead of their conditioning, where would they have walked? If they had believed reality could bend around their deepest truth, what would they have dared to build? Then you let your steps answer on their behalf. Not with grand gestures at first, but with subtle, quiet acts of disobedience to the old field. A boundary held with calm instead of rage. A creative impulse followed before your mind explains why it's pointless. A rest taken without asking permission from productivity ghosts. Each act is small, but each one updates the code. You are not waiting for the system to change so you can feel different. You are feeling different so the system has no choice but to change. To change the system, you must change the way you observe it. Up until now, you've looked at your life from inside the pattern like someone pressed up against a stained glass window, mistaking fragments of color for the full sky. You've identified as the wounded, the sensitive, the overwhelmed heir of difficult circumstances. But the entangled node does not awaken by rearranging the fragments. It awakens by stepping back far enough to see the whole structure at once. This is where science stops being theoretical and becomes a weapon in your hands. In quantum physics, the observer effect is not about a person staring at a particle with their eyes. It's about the measuring apparatus, the way reality is interfaced with determining which of many possible states becomes actual. You are not simply looking at your life. You are measuring it with your nervous system, your expectations, your beliefs, your emotional baseline. Your lineage trained you to be a certain kind of measuring device. If you unconsciously expect disappointment, you measure events in a way that confirms it. If you have been wired to anticipate abandonment, you scan interactions for microsigns of withdrawal and interpret ambiguity as rejection. If your system has learned that joy is temporary, you keep one foot braced for loss, splitting your attention and diluting your presence. You call this realism. It is not. It is inherited calibration. To become the node your bloodline has been waiting for, you must recalibrate the instrument. Not by forcing positive thoughts over old code, but by altering the state from which you observe. This begins in the simplest place, your breath. Not as a wellness trend, but as the lowest level interface between your consciousness and your physiology. Your breath is the dial that sets your nervous system's measurement mode. When you breathe shallow and fast, your system enters survival observation. It looks for threat tracks, danger, prioritizes worst-case futures. When you lengthen and deepen your exhale, your system shifts towards safety observation. It can perceive nuance, alternative outcomes, subtle opportunities. The external situation may not change immediately, but the field of possibilities you can register does. So here is your first protocol, and it is more radical than it sounds. You will not make significant lineage-altering decisions from a survival breath. When you feel the old fear rise, when the pressure spikes, when the voice of the ancestors' panic whispers, don't risk it. Don't stand out. Don't leave you. Do not argue with it. You change the measurement mode. You slow your inhale. You lengthen your exhale until your body receives the message. We are not in the war they were in. We are not in the famine they survived. We are here now with more options than they had. Only then do you ask the question, what choice would serve the highest potential of this bloodline, not just its oldest fear? The answer that arises from that state will feel different. It may not be comfortable. It may not be convenient, but it will carry a quiet solidity, a kind of grounded inevitability, as if the future you're choosing has already been waiting, nodding just beyond the edge of your previous perception. That sensation is coherence, your internal field aligning with a higher probability structure in the quantum field. This is not about reckless rebellion. It is about precise deviation. If you stare at your family's patterns with the same fear they used, you will collapse the waveform into the same outcome. If you observe them from a regulated present spacious state, you can hold their story without being swallowed by it. You can say, yes, this happened. Yes, this hurt. And still it is not the only possible configuration of reality available to us. The moment you do this, the entanglement begins to reroute. Because you are not only entangled backward, you are entangled forward. Your descendants, biological or energetic, will not inherit your words. They will inherit your frequency range. They will be born into the field you stabilized, into the emotional physics you insisted on making real through repeated observation. This is why your small daily protocols matter more than your occasional breakthroughs. The way you speak to yourself when you make a mistake. The way you treat your body when it is tired. The way you respond to tension escalation or presence. Each micro-observation is a data point in the field training reality, what normal feels like in your line. You are teaching the quantum field with every breath how to see your bloodline, and the field is listening. So the question refines again: if you knew that your ordinary way of observing life was secretly the core ritual reshaping your lineage, how much longer would you allow your perception to be dominated by old fear states you did not choose? Knowing isn't enough anymore. Your lineage has had knowledge before. They knew when something was wrong. They felt when a relationship was poisoning them, when a job was slowly eroding their soul, when a belief system was too small for what they sensed inside. Some of them even articulated it in late-night whispers, in hidden journals, in half-finished projects abandoned in drawers. They had insight. What they didn't have was ritual. Not ritual as empty performance, but ritual as structured interaction with the quantum field, repeatable actions that teach your nervous system a new way to exist, until the new pattern becomes more natural than the old one. This is what you are here to build, not just a new story, but a new protocol for how your bloodline meets reality. The ritual begins where the pattern usually tightens, at the moment of the familiar loop. You know the loop by now, the exact flavor of conversation where your voice shrinks. The financial number that whenever you approach it, something mysteriously breaks. The emotional demand from a loved one that pulls you into roles you swore you'd outgrown. The precise type of opportunity that triggers your instinct to delay until it disappears. Those loops are not just bad habits. They are coherence maintenance events. Each time you play your assigned role, the lineage relaxes. The field says, yes, this is how we do things here. Reality is still what we thought. Your body pays the cost: tension, resentment, exhaustion, so the system can stay familiar. You have done this for years. Now, as the entangled node, you will do something that seems small to the outside world, but is revolutionary in the field. You will interrupt the loop at the behavioral level, even if your emotions haven't caught up yet. This is the ritual. The moment you recognize you are about to step into the old role, you pause. Not for an hour, for one breath, deeply deliberate. In that breath, you name what is happening without drama. This is the pattern where I trade my truth for their comfort. Or this is the moment my lineage usually chooses scarcity. Or this is the fork where we historically self-destruct. Naming it cleanly collapses denial. The field registers awareness present. Then before your mind can flood you with all the reasons why you must comply, you make a micro-choice in the opposite direction. You say one truer sentence than you normally would. You keep 50 of the 100 units of energy you'd usually sacrifice. You delay the automatic yes and replace it with I need to feel into that. The old fear will scream. The guilt will rise like static in your blood. Your nervous system may shake because it is crossing the border of what your lineage has called safe. This is where most of your ancestors retreated. Not because they were weak, but because they had no map for what comes after the guilt. You do. You remember guilt is not guidance, it is withdrawal symptoms from an inherited reality. So you stay. You breathe. You let the guilt burn without letting it dictate. You feel the panic, but you do not bow. You allow the old field to thrash inside you as it realizes it is losing its favorite route. You do nothing dramatic. You simply hold. To observers, this looks like a minor boundary, an awkward pause, a slightly different way of responding to the quantum field. It is a new measurement for the first time in this bloodline. Under this exact set of emotional conditions, the node chose differently. The waveform adjusts, and because you are entangled, this adjustment does not stay in you. It ripples. A sibling suddenly considers a boundary they'd never imagined. A cousin years from now inexplicably feels less obligated to marry the first person who chooses them. A future child not yet conceived is born with a nervous system that finds it slightly easier to say no without collapsing. They will never know it traced back to a single breath where you refuse to repeat the loop, but the field will know. And somewhere in the strange geometry of consciousness, your ancestors will feel a pressure lift. This is ritual, small, precise, repeated deviations from the old script that over time become the new law. You do not need candles or mantras for this to be sacred, though you can use them if they help your body understand that something important is happening. What makes it sacred is the intention: I am no longer just surviving my inheritance. I am rewriting its interface with reality. You will not perform this ritual perfectly. Some days you will fall back into old patterns, speak from the wound, choose from fear. The lineage will sigh in relief. We're still who we've always been. In those moments you might be tempted to drown in shame. Don't. Shame is just another way the old field keeps your attention on your supposed failure instead of on the fact that you are attempting what no one before you has had the tools to attempt. The metric is not perfection. The metric is frequency, how often you remember you are the node and return to the work. Each return strengthens the new configuration. You are not doing this alone in a vacuum. You are doing this as a conscious participant in a network of entangled lives, past and future, all quietly recalibrating as you enact simple, repeatable acts of defiance against the old reality. This is how a bloodline changes, not overnight, not in one dramatic ceremony, but in the steady, relentless accumulation of small, choices made by one person who finally remembers what they are. You are not the only node. For a long time it felt that way. You looked around and saw people content to play the roles assigned to them, unbothered by the fractures you could sense in the script. You tried to speak about what you felt, the déjà vu, the heavy repeating cycles, the uncanny synchronicities, and watched eyes glaze over or smiles tighten. So you learned to keep most of it inside, assuming you were the anomaly, the glitch, the one misconfigured piece in an otherwise functioning system. You were wrong about that. You were not the glitch, you were the diagnostic. Across the planet, across cultures and histories and languages, other entangled nodes have been waking up in parallel. People who cannot bear to pretend that the old game is all there is. People whose bodies refuse to fully normalize the patterns everyone around them calls just life. People who are haunted not only by what happened, but by what never got the chance to happen. You are part of that network whether you have met them or not. At the level of the quantum field, resonance precedes contact. Before you ever speak, before you ever find each other in physical or digital space, your fields have already recognized kinship. You feel it as an inexplicable relief when you finally encounter someone whose nervous system doesn't flinch at the size of what you sense. Conversations with them seem to accelerate. Hours move strangely. Ideas you've been carrying for years suddenly find language in their presence. This is not just chemistry, it is coherence. When two entangled nodes meet, something happens that is bigger than the friendship, relationship, or collaboration that might form on the surface. Their combined field can hold configurations of reality that neither could stabilize alone. New possibilities become thinkable. Old patterns become visible in higher resolution. The lineage level work speeds up. This is why the old field tries to isolate you with shame. If it can convince you that you're too intense, too sensitive, too deep, it can keep you from aligning with others whose presence would amplify your capacity. Isolation slows waveform change. Connection accelerates it. So as you enact your small rituals of deviation, understand that you are also sending out a signal, an electromagnetic, behavioral, psychic broadcast that says, a different way of being human is currently being stabilized here. Other nodes feel this often without knowing why. They will find you through synchronicity, a random video that won't let them scroll past a conversation in a place they weren't supposed to be, a sudden impulse to reach out. Your bloodline work is not only vertical, moving back and forth through generations, it is horizontal, linking you to a web of contemporaries whose lineages intersect through you. This is where purpose stops being a vague abstraction and becomes physics. You are not here to save the world. That fantasy is just another way the ego tries to avoid its precise responsibility. You are here to hold a specific frequency band of reality so steadily that any person, ancestor, or descendant entangled with you gains access to it more easily. Your mission is not a job description. It is a field description. Maybe your frequency band is radical honesty. Maybe it is uncompromising tenderness. Maybe it is creative audacity. Maybe it is dignified refusal. Maybe it is the capacity to stay regulated in rooms that historically explode. Whatever it is, you've been orbiting it your whole life, drawn to certain themes, certain conversations, certain kinds of injustice that make your bones burn. Those obsessions are not random. They are coordinates. They point to the sliver of reality your nervous system is designed to anchor. When you continually choose in alignment with that sliver, you are not just being yourself. You are stabilizing a state in the quantum field. Other nodes can sync to it consciously or not. Your descendants will inherit it as the new default. Your ancestors through you will finally have an interface to experience it. This is why betraying yourself feels so violent. It is not merely personal disappointment. It is a temporary collapse of the field you came to hold. Each time you override your own knowing to keep things comfortable, the network flickers. Each time you return to your truth, even awkwardly, the network brightens. Somewhere, someone you'll never meet feels a tiny increase in the possibility of being honest, creative, loving, clear. They will attribute it to a book, a conversation, a random moment. They will not know that far away another node refused to lie about who they are that day. You are not supposed to track all the ripples. You are supposed to trust that they exist. From the perspective of your ordinary mind, this is too much to hold. That's why you are not asked to hold it as a concept, but as a posture, a way of standing in your own life, a way of meeting each moment with the understanding that you are not a disconnected unit, but a junction in a living fractal bloodline collective, and cosmos intersecting in real time through your decisions. When you feel alone, remember loneliness is sometimes just lag, the time delay between a field changing and evidence catching up. The network is already online. Your role is not to build it from scratch. Your role is to stop pretending you're not part of it and live as if every breath you take is teaching reality what your lineage and your species is now allowed to become. Everything returns to the body. You can speak about quantum fields and entangled lineages and networks of awakened nodes, but if your flesh is still living by the old laws, the shift remains conceptual. Your bloodline does not pass down theories. It passes down patterns of breath, posture, tension, illness, reflex. Your body is the living archive, and now it is becoming the relay. Notice how your shoulders curve when shame rises, how your jaw clenches when you anticipate conflict, how your stomach knots before you say something that might disrupt the peace. Those are not random quirks. They are physical spells, inherited somatic configurations that tell your system how to interpret reality. You were born into a body already rehearsing your ancestors' conclusions. The chronic tightness in your chest might carry the echo of someone who never got to exhale fully after the war ended. The heaviness in your legs might mirror generations who learned it was safer not to move, not to leave, not to risk. The numbness around your heart might be what allowed them to function in marriages, jobs, regimes where feeling fully would have broken them. They didn't have time, safety, or language to complete those responses. The activation remained incomplete, suspended in tissues passed forward as just how we are. The field stored the unfinished motions as potential energy. That potential is surfacing through you. This is why when you start changing, your body often seems to get worse before it gets better. Old injuries demand attention, sleep patterns collapse. Strange pains arise with no clear cause. You wonder if you are breaking. In a way, you are. You are breaking the somatic agreement your bloodline made with reality. At the quantum level, your DNA is not just a biological instruction manual. It is an antenna, a structured way of receiving and transmitting information to the field. The sequences that handled survival under old conditions are now being asked to run something else, coherence, under expanded conditions. That reconfiguration is not abstract. It feels like fatigue, like trembling, like waves of emotion that make no sense for your current circumstances. You are not regressing. You are discharging. What your ancestors suppressed, you are allowing to complete. A sob that shakes your entire frame for no reason you can name. A shaking in your hands when you speak a truth that in previous generations would have cost you safety. A deep animal exhaustion after you hold a boundary instead of collapsing. This is not weakness, it is throughput. You are the one finally letting the energy exit the system. Here, most people make one of two mistakes. They either over-identify with the sensations, "This is my permanent state. I am broken," or they try to bypass them with spiritual language and mindset tricks. "I am above this. My body is an illusion." Both errors keep the old configuration intact. One freezes you at the level of symptom. The other floats you above the site of transformation. The entangled node takes a third path. You let the body tell the story, the lineage never finished, without giving it full authorship over your future. You feel the shaking and think, of course you're trembling. No one before me felt safe enough to speak like this. You feel the grief and think, of course you're drowning. We are crying for more than one life. You put a hand on your own chest as if you were holding a younger relative, and you breathe until the wave passes through instead of being stuffed back into the archive. This is somatic prophecy. You allow your body to express the past while your awareness orients to the future. You stand in the doorway of your own physiology, one hand touching what was the other, reaching toward what is becoming. You do not rush the process. At the same time, you do not let every sensation define you. You keep returning to a simple anchor: I am the one who can feel this and still choose. Each time you stay with the sensation a little longer than your ancestors could, the pattern weakens. Each time you interrupt an automatic muscular response, unclenching your jaw, dropping your shoulders, softening your belly while holding a new internal stance. You are updating the way your bloodline's instrument plays. Over time, your body starts broadcasting a different baseline. Instead of chronic vigilance, a quiet readiness. Instead of constant collapse, a flexible yielding. Instead of numbness, a stable sensitivity that doesn't overwhelm you. This is not just healing trauma. It is preparing your vessel to hold a different reality density. Because what is coming for you and for the network you're part of is not lighter in the sense of easier. It is lighter in the sense of more information, more sensation, more awareness flowing through the same nervous system, without a new configuration that would fry your circuits. With it, you become what your bloodline has been secretly engineering toward a human, who can feel more than those before you without breaking and choose more freely than they ever could. You may never receive external validation for this level of work. There will be no medals for the nights you spent shaking instead of numbing, the mornings you rose with swollen eyes and still chose differently, the days you held your ground while your body thought it might die from guilt. But in the silence of your cells, something is acknowledging you. The past is loosening its grip. The future is drawing closer. Your very flesh is learning to trust a reality it has never known. And as your body learns, the field around you begins to organize in a new way, pulling the next phase of your entangled assignment into view. There comes a moment in this work when the axis flips. Up to now, your life has felt like a reaction to family patterns, to cultural scripts, to internal weather systems you didn't consciously design. You have been moving inside timelines built before you, trying to breathe in houses you did not choose. But when the body starts to stabilize, when your rituals of deviation become normal, when your observation mode stays regulated more often than not, something subtle yet irreversible occurs. Reality begins to react to you. You notice it first in small glitches. Situations that would have escalated don't. People who used to pull you into the same draining dynamic find their usual hooks no longer fitting. Patterns that felt inevitable start to stall out midway, as if the scriptwriter forgot their lines. Opportunities that once passed by unfazed now seem to slow down around you, turning their face toward your awareness as if awaiting permission. This is not fate suddenly favoring you. This is the physics of a node that has changed its state. At the quantum level, when a key variable in a system shifts, the system must reorganize. You, as an entangled node, have become that variable. Your baseline frequency is not what it was. Your breath is not what it was. Your willingness to betray your own truth for coherence is not what it was. The field has no choice but to recalibrate. Do not romanticize this. Recalibration is disruptive. Some relationships will shake. Not because you are better than anyone, but because their nervous systems are calibrated to a version of you that no longer exists. They will unconsciously try to pull you back into the old frequency, not out of malice, but because the previous configuration felt safe to them. Your new stance confronts their unexamined agreements with reality. You will be tempted to dim again, to apologize for the space your truth takes up, to make yourself smaller so no one has to feel the dissonance. That temptation is the last stronghold of the old timeline. If you collapse, the system will sigh in relief and close around you tighter than before. If you hold, a handover takes place. The handover is not ceremonial. No one announces it. It happens in an ordinary moment that feels strangely dense. A conversation where you do not backtrack a choice, where you do not self-sabotage a boundary, where you do not over-explain. In that moment, the quantum field registers a new constant. This node will no longer stabilize the old reality at the cost of itself. From then on, the mechanics change. You are no longer primarily processing the past. You are generating the template for the future. Your attention is no longer obsessed with what went wrong in your story. It becomes magnetized toward what is trying to be born through you. Ideas arrive with a different texture, less like escapist fantasies, more like instructions from a future that knows exactly what it's doing. You feel pulled, not pushed, compelled, not pressured. The work still costs you, but the cost feels like training, not punishment. This is where you begin to understand why your bloodline waited for you. They were not waiting for someone perfect. They were waiting for someone sufficiently awake, to hold a different reality steady in their body without needing everyone else's agreement. Someone who could love them without obeying their limits. Someone who could honor their story without reenacting it. You become that person the moment you choose your frequency over their comfort, and do not reverse the choice the next day. From here, your influence becomes less about fixing and more about emanation. You stop trying to convince anyone. You stop arguing theory. You stop needing them to validate your perception. You simply live as if the reality you know is possible is already the baseline and let others feel the difference. Some will resist harder, some will drift away, some will quietly rearrange themselves. A few will step closer vertebra by vertebra, drawn not by your words but by the relief of a field where they don't have to shrink. All the while, your ancestors' unfinished stories keep surfacing, but now they meet a different context. Instead of drowning you, they move through a vessel that knows what they are, not destiny. You feel the old panic rise and you hold it with the steadiness of someone standing on a shore, watching a storm offshore, knowing the land beneath their feet is not the same eroded ground it once was. The waves still crash, they do not claim you. This is the crossing point, the thin membrane between two ways of existing: life as repetition and life as initiation. Crossing it doesn't mean you never hurt again. It means the hurt no longer proves that nothing changed. It becomes evidence that more of the old density is ready to move. You no longer ask, will this ever end? You ask, what new configuration is this pain making room for if I don't run? The handover completes when you adopt a simple, quiet sentence as a lived reality. I am no longer available to be the place where this pattern stays alive. Not just in your mind, not as a dramatic declaration, but in your calendar, your posture, your tone of voice, your breathing when someone tries to pull you backward. At that point, whether you see it or not, your bloodline has entered a new trajectory and the quantum field has already begun weaving the consequences in your life, in lives you'll never see and in futures that will one day look back and call this era by a different name. There is one more lie to burn. The lie that says all of this is beautiful language but not really about you. That somewhere out there are real chosen ones, real initiates, real bloodline breakers, while you are just someone watching a video in a room that still smells like your old life. Look at your surroundings, the light on the walls, the position of your body, the current state of your breathing. None of this is random backdrop. This is the exact configuration of reality in which your lineage elected to make its move. This is the room where the node accepts its name. You have waited for external confirmation, a sign big enough to justify the weight you feel, a mentor radiant enough to reflect what you suspect you are, a certainty strong enough to silence all doubt. But that is not how this kind of initiation works. The quantum field does not knight you with a sword. It mirrors your decision. Your ancestors can lean in. The network can surround you. Timelines can tilt in your favor. But the act that changes everything is unbearably simple. You agree internally to live as the one your bloodline has been waiting for, and you stop negotiating that identity with people who never carried your assignment. You will still doubt yourself. You will still have days where you feel small, messy, human, unfinished. That is not a problem. That is the point. The node is not an angel. The node is a human nervous system that has learned to host more reality than those before it. So here is where the prophecy collapses into practice. Right now, without moving toward performance, let your spine lengthen by a single invisible degree. Let your shoulders drop 0.5 centimeter away from your ears. Let your jaw unclench. One slow inhale through the nose. One longer exhale through the mouth. And under your breath or only in thought, let the words form. It ends with me. It begins with me. You are not cursing your line. You are not cutting them off. You are marking the seam where one era of your bloodline's physics closes and another opens. From this point forward, you will still make mistakes. You will still sometimes choose from fear. You will still occasionally replay old loops. But you will not misinterpret those moments as proof that you are not the node. You will treat them as data information about where the old field still has hooks, and you will return again and again to the stance you just sampled in your body. Because what truly makes you the entangled node is not that a video told you so. It's that you keep choosing to behave as if it is true in rooms where no one is applauding, in conversations where history pulls hardest in decisions, where no one will ever know how much it cost you. Your descendants will not inherit this video. They will inherit the atmosphere you stabilize after it ends. They will grow up in homes where certain kinds of sounds no longer exist because you chose to speak. They will move through bodies that do not carry the same reflexive terror because you chose to stay with sensations instead of abandoning yourself. They will make choices from a baseline you built with 1,000 unglamorous rituals. They will call it just how life is. You will know it as the future you negotiated on their behalf. And somewhere behind you, in graves, in photographs, in forgotten names, in unknown faces, your ancestors will finally taste through you the kind of reality they were never allowed to believe in. This is the handover. The timelines are now in your blood, not your mind. The video is ending. The initiation is not. When you stand up from where you are sitting, reality will treat your next step as an answer to the question it has been asking you since before you were born. Will you continue the loop, or will you walk as the entangled node your bloodline has been waiting for? You already know. Now show the field.